Welcome to Team 4's presentation for HM660, the gender gap in the healthcare field. The gender gap is an irrefutable and very real phenomenon, researched, analyzed, and documented for decades. Articles abound and hypotheses exist. Though progress has been made, a gender gap, and more specifically, a gender pay gap, persists in the employment field of healthcare. When analyzing this disparity, there are many questions to be asked. What are the causal factors? How has history contributed to the incongruence? How has government acknowledged and influenced the matter? What are the facts of the healthcare wage gap? What does it look like today? And how can we look to a future with more parity? This presentation aims to address the issues relating to the gender gap in healthcare employment and works to deliver thoughtful and researched answers. We also hope to present some of the prevailing ideas that may help drive progress and further address this breach. According to a study by Farrell and Glynn in 2013, the gender wage gap is often attributed to the choices women make. Choices to work fewer hours, take on lower paying jobs, or opt out of the workforce for longer periods of time than men. While these choices contribute to 27% of the gender pay gap, this type of thinking can promote dismissive attitudes towards equal pay policies and legislation, as well as overlooks other significant factors that impact it as well. As can be seen in Figure 1, approximately 60% of these are known factors. Choice of occupation, as noted just now, equates to 27% of the gap. 10.5% of the gap is attributed to the experience women forego when they interrupt their careers to raise children. Union status proves to actually be somewhat of a benefit to women, with the gap between unionized male and female workers in 2014 being only 9.4 cents, as opposed to an 18.7-cent gap between non-unionized workers. Industry wage differences represent another almost 22% and is attributable to the differences in wages paid by industries that employ mostly men and pay more, or mostly women and pay less. Race and ethnicity, unfortunately, still contributes 2.4% of the gender pay gap. Notably, women's access to higher education has helped to ease the gender wage disparity by almost 7%, though this hasn't been enough to completely close the gap. The troublesome reality of the remaining 40% of the pay gap, representing more than 10 cents on the dollar or $4,465 annually among workers making the median wage, is that it is unexplained, meaning there is no obvious, measurable reason for a difference in pay. Possible explanations range from overt sexism to unintentional gender-based discrimination to reluctance among women to negotiate for higher pay. Let's take a quick look back in time. Has there always been gender inequality? For generations, archaeologists postulated a belief which endorsed the notion that prehistoric man spent his waking hours hunting woolly mammoths, cleaning his spears, and dragging his cave woman around by her hair. Prehistoric woman, for her part, is painted as a berry collector, caretaker of children, and preparer of meals. This theory has pervaded modern society for generations, in part perpetuated through movies, cartoons, and museum dioramas. Interestingly, modern anthropology no longer supports this myth. According to the 2007 science writing, The Invisible Sex, scholars now believe that there was no significant division of labor, and at least some of the time, Stone Age humans actually shared the daily labors of life. When women did in fact stay behind during the hunt, they spent much of their time inventing the tools and foundations of future society. Through numerous studies, it has come to light that female humans have been the chief engine in the unprecedented high level of human sociability. Women were the inventors of the most useful tools. They shared equally in the provision of food for human societies. They almost certainly drove the human invention of language, and they were the ones who created agriculture. Women's roles also likely included counselor, storyteller, medical caregiver, and magician. Of course, human history before the advent of record keeping is impossible to state with any real certainty. But let's, for the sake of argument, say that these ideas of the last few decades are accurate. If our female predecessors did indeed create and shape such a future, when did things change? And why are we here today writing this research paper? The truth of the matter is that subsequent cultures and generations would develop and define roles largely by gender, bringing us to where we are now. It appears that much of this change germinated as humans discovered the virtues of agriculture. Women continued to fill significant roles in the scouting of appropriate land and soil, planting and harvesting. However, it is postulated that as farming became more labor intensive and larger in scope, that roles diverged and the scales really started to tip. Women needed to have more children to meet the labor demand, and men therefore took over many of their tasks. Women no longer contributed as much to the economic structure of the household, and consequently, their rights, status, and power were lessened. This precipitated a role change, an evolution primarily based on gender, and brought about a new division of labor in many arenas, both in the home and at the workplace. Gender bias has existed for thousands of years with far reaching impact. To appreciate the significance of this impact, it is important to understand that gender is a social construct. It does not exist naturally, but it is created by cultural and societal norms. Women's roles have been defined and created by the arbitrary assignment of norms based on gender. Societal factors guide gender construction. Traditionally, women were seen as the caretakers of the family and reacted to what previous generations expected of them. From early childhood, a woman's own expectations of her ability to have a successful career was diminished because of the attitude and tradition from her elders and societal norms. Women did not have access to the same educational opportunities as men, which excluded them from high paying occupations. Subtle shifts since the early 19th century have opened the doors to a variety of careers that have been male dominated for years. In the not so distant past, women were prohibited careers in medicine because of preconceptions and gender based stereotypes. Many people have associated a gender's personality traits with a matching career and assume this will be the sector in which they will fall. A woman's caring nature has associated her with careers in healthcare, but negative biases have perpetuated the belief that women have less ability in science and math, leaving some women to not even consider the possibility of a career in the medical field. Gender roles are the product of the interactions between individuals and their environment, and they give individuals cues about what sort of behavior is believed to be appropriate for what sex. This guiding force has come with restrictions that women continue to battle. Gender based stereotypes are evident throughout the healthcare field. Men continue to be seen as strong, dominant, intelligent, assertive, brave, rational, and independent, while women are seen as being weaker, emotional, submissive, dependent, sensitive, irrational, and cooperative. These stereotypes are played out continually in the work environment, where female physicians were almost 5 times more likely to experience career advancement obstacles and more than 3 times more likely to experience disrespectful punitive actions. And nursing, a field dominated by women, remains undervalued. Women continue to encounter gender inequalities in the healthcare workforce. The healthcare profession to this date is essentially sex segregated, as 84% of physicians are male and 97% of nurses are female. Despite the fact that women dominate the nursing field 10 to 1, they are not exempt from a gender based pay gap that gives male workers better wages, sending male nurses home with anywhere from $3,800 to $17,000 more than women make every single year. Will gender differences ever be eradicated when these differences are so ingrained in our culture? While strides continue to be made, ongoing work is needed to shrink the gender gap that continues to exist. We should be striving for gender equality, where women are afforded the same opportunities as men. Although female nurses outnumber males by a ratio of 10 to 1, a study conducted by the National Sample Survey of Registered Nurses and the American Community Survey shows a blatant wage gap in the nursing field. Males in the sample only represented 7%. However, the sample showed that a male RN salary is higher than a female RN salary by $5,148 for each year of the study. Male RNs working in the hospital earned $3,873 more than their female counterparts. Male RNs in the ambulatory care setting earned $7,678 more than their female counterparts. Male RNs in cardiology earned $6,034 more than female RNs, and male nurse anesthetists earned $17,290 more than female nurse anesthetists. Not only is there a wage gap in the nursing field, other fields show males making more than their female counterparts. For example, newly trained male physicians earn an average of $3,600 more than newly trained female physicians. Male physician assistants earn 30% more than female physician assistants, and healthcare executive level males earn $126,262, while females earn only $100,762. Currently, the healthcare gender gap is showing an increase, despite other professions showing decreases. It was reported in March of 2016 that the wage gap is 17.3% in favor of males, with very few fields in the industry that are reporting women earning more than their male counterparts. With so many laws in place to promote equality, why is there still such a gap? Some argue that it is simply because women choose positions that are not as challenging as men. For example, women tend to go into pediatrics, while men might choose cardiology or surgery. Others say that it is due to a woman choosing a position that only requires a 40-hour work week. It has also been said that women are not as aggressive in the negotiation phase of their salary discussion in comparison to men. There is hope that the Obama rule, taking effect next September, will decrease the gender and wage gap. The rule will require companies employing greater than 100 people to disclose pay based on gender, race, and ethnicity. One of the best examples of wage gap for women in the workplace is based on history and the effects of events from the past to the future. During World War II, the workforce was inundated by women taking the place of men. Think of Rosie the Riveter. Those women were paid 60% of that typically paid to the men. The National Ward Labor Board in 1942 coined the phrase equal pay for equal work. This wasn't so much in support of women and increasing their pay, but employers were not able to pay women a lesser amount than the men would receive once they returned from the war. This wasn't exactly an equality program, especially when some employers used loopholes to circumvent the system, such as re rating job descriptions and changing job requirements. This resulted in women earning less for doing the same type of work. 20 years later, the Equal Pay Act of 1963 was another law intended to eradicate wage disparity between the sexes, but there still appears to be a long way to go. Despite a number of laws enacted to prevent discrimination against women in the workforce, the unfortunate reality of women not being afforded the same opportunities as men persists. Many believe that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 would outlaw discrimination in many sectors, including gender discrimination. However, a law is only as powerful as the ability to enforce it, and passing a law does not guarantee compliance. What the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did accomplish was to increase the focus and awareness around discrimination. The Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, signed on January 29, 2009, is the very first piece of legislation that President Barack Obama signed into law. The law, named after a woman who discovered that her employer was paying her less than men doing the same job, makes it easier for women to effectively challenge unequal pay. The law amended the Civil Rights Act of 1964 so that unfair pay complaints can be filed within 180 days of a discriminatory paycheck, and that 180 days resets after each discriminatory paycheck. There are many organizations on a local, state, and federal level that are committed to promoting gender and wage equality in the workplace. Some of these are listed here for your information. Laws to address discrimination are and will continue to be important, but the most likely avenue for change is with employers that have made changes in their corporate culture to embrace diversity. In the healthcare arena, establishing best practices that promote diversity will create not only a competitive advantage, but will provide valuable insight around promoting health and wellness to a diverse patient population. This month has been witness to unprecedented new legislation in Massachusetts, with the governor signing the United States' strongest equal pay law. This law forbids companies from asking prospective employees their most recent salary prior to making them a job offer. Advocates of equal pay for women are applauding this, deeming it a significant step in the struggle for a level playing field. A study performed by Hayes in 2013 for the Institute for Women's Policy Research demonstrated that if trends in wage increases for women continue along their current trajectory, the gender wage gap will not close until the year 2058. If this turns out to be the case, working women today will not see wage equality during their professional lives. This is a very disturbing finding. But what else can be done to accelerate the attainment of equal pay in the workplace? In June of 2016, President Obama called on private sector companies to make a pledge that they will look at their own internal gender wage gaps. Any company that signed up for this White House Equal Pay Pledge agreed to conduct an analysis of pay by gender across its entire workforce, review its own hiring and promotion practices to reduce bias, and include equal pay in overall efforts to promote equality within its own ranks, as well as to look for any other practices that can ensure women are paid equally with men. The 28 companies listed here are the earliest supporters of wage equality in their organizations. What are some other ideas that individuals and organizations can implement in order to mitigate the wage gap? It has been noted time and time again through various studies that men tend to be more aggressive when it comes to negotiating salary at the time of initial employment. One study of graduating master's students examined negotiations of a first job offer. Despite urging from their university to negotiate, only 7% of the female graduates negotiated for a higher salary, but 57% of the men asked for more money. For this reason, some experts in the human resource field are promoting the elimination of salary negotiation as a method to prevent wage discrimination in the workplace. But is this a realistic option? Another option is to formally train young professional women in the art of negotiation, with the expectation that formal training might encourage a high percentage of young job seekers to negotiate their salaries from the earliest points in their careers. Higher salaries early in their careers will translate to higher salaries later in their careers as well. Additionally, promoting pay transparency in the workplace would enable both men and women to determine if their compensation is equal to that of their peers, serving to mitigate gender based wage inequality. Here is a poignant statistic. Women who never married earn 94% of their male counterparts, while married women earn only 78%. This is what's often referred to as the motherhood penalty, which happens later in a woman's career. Women who have children often report that they take time off, reduce their hours, and sometimes even quit work in order to take care of their children. One study found that while men's earnings increase by 6% when they become fathers, women with children saw their earnings decrease by 4% for each child that they had. For this reason, there are several opportunities that will not only promote wage equality for women in the workforce, but may also assist in the recruitment and retention of talented female employees. For parents of young children, the lack of affordable, high quality early childhood programs can prevent working parents from ensuring that their families are cared for while they fulfill the demands of their jobs, and can inhibit their long term success. Investing in affordable, high quality childcare creates long lasting structures that support both working parents and children, and increase a woman's ability to keep her job, excel in the workforce, and lower the gender wage gap. Additionally, the benefit of paid sick days would affect the gender wage gap by ensuring that women, who most often care for sick family members, would not lose pay or their jobs just because they or their child fell ill. Paid family and medical leave programs could provide wage replacement to working women and men when they must take time off to care for their families, providing much needed economic security. Paid leave would help to reduce the gaps in work histories, which women are more likely to experience, that contribute to the wage gap and affect women's opportunities to rise through the ranks. The United States is the only developed country that does not guarantee workers paid maternity leave after the birth or adoption of a child. In fact, only 12% of the U.S. workforce has access to paid family leave through their employers. This has a direct impact on a woman's ability to continue on her career trajectory, resulting in months and years of lost opportunity for professional growth. Raising the minimum wage would also be a significant benefit to working women. Closing the gap in earnings between men and women would cut the poverty rate in half for working women, according to a report from Maria Shriver and the Center for American Progress. While nearly two-thirds of mothers are either the primary breadwinner or secondary breadwinner for their family, women make up approximately two-thirds of all minimum wage workers. Increasing the federal minimum wage to $10.10 an hour would boost wages for approximately 15 million women and would significantly help to close the gender wage gap. Economists Heidi Hartman and Jeffrey Hayes of the Institute for Women's Policy Research calculated that paying women who work full time year round the same as men would boost their incomes by $6,250 a year on average. That extra money would raise 3 million of the nearly 6 million working women who live below the poverty line above it. The extra income would also have a big impact on the economy as a whole, boosting the gross domestic product by 2.9% or $450 billion. Gender equality in the workplace isn't just the right thing to do, it's good for women, good for families, and good for the overall economy.